CO relatives, welcome to the IPKC's On Sacred Ground podcast. This is episode 2, and I'm your host and current IPKC National Chair, Dr. Tiffany Smith. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and a descendant of Muskogee Creek Nations of Oklahoma. And in my professional role, I serve as the Director of Research for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I also am adjunct faculty in the Higher Education Leadership Program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I did want to make mention that where my feet are planted today are on the ancestral homelands of the Comanche, Osage, and Wichita and affiliated tribal nations in what is now known as Blanchard, Oklahoma. For episode 2 today, we are so honored to have 3 phenomenal Indigenous women scholars and mothers, Drs. Robin Minthorn, Chris Nelson, and Heather Schotten. Today, we want to talk about their forthcoming book, Indigenous Motherhood in the Academy, published by Rutgers University Press. This book will be available this August, but is already available for pre-orders online. So hurry and get you alls now. Their book, entitled Indigenous Motherhood in the Academy, highlights the experiences and narratives emerging from Indigenous mothers in the Academy who are negotiating their roles in multiple contexts. The essays in this volume contribute to the broader higher education literature and the literature on Indigenous representation in the academy, filling a long-time gap that has excluded Indigenous women scholar voices. This book covers diverse topics such as the journey to motherhood, lessons through motherhood, acknowledging ancestors and grandparents in one's mothering, how historical trauma and violence plague the past, and balancing mothering through the healing process. As an Indigenous mother and higher education professional myself, I'm really honored, humbled, and excited to read this book and to talk with these amazing Indigenous women scholars today. Okay, now to introduce a bit more about our special guest. Dr. Robin Minthorn comes to University of Washington, Tacoma from the University of New Mexico, where she was an associate professor. Dr. Robin Stars Ep.2 Minthorn, citizen of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma and descendant of the Apache, Nez Perce, Umatilla, and Assiniboine nations, is the director of the EDD program, associate professor of educational leadership, and director of Indigenous education initiatives. Prior to becoming a faculty member, Dr. Minthorn served as coordinator of Native American Affairs at Oklahoma State University and an adjunct faculty at Pawnee Nation College. Preceding that, as an academic advisor at Comanche Nation College, which is Oklahoma's first tribal college. Dr. Minthorn also co-founded Gamma Delta Pi Inc., American Indian Sisterhood, and RAIN, Retaining American Indians Now, as an undergraduate at the University of Oklahoma. As an academic professional, she co-founded the ONASH, the Oklahoma Native American Students in Higher Education Conference. Dr. Minthorn's primary research interests include Indigenous leadership in higher education, intergenerational leadership perspectives in tribal communities, supporting Native American college students, and campus climate for Native American college students. Dr. Minthorn earned her Ph.D. in educational leadership and policy studies from Oklahoma State University. She is the co-editor of the Indigenous Leadership in Higher Education book published by Routledge, Reclaiming Indigenous Research in Higher Education published by Rutgers University Press, and Unsettling Settler Colonial Education, Transformational Indigenous Praxis Model book by Teachers College Press. She lives on the Puyallup Reservation in Puyallup, Washington, with her partner, Gabe, and daughter, Roxy. Welcome, Dr. Minthorn. Next, we have Dr. Chris Nelson. Dr. Chris Nelson is from the Coake and Dene tribes and grew up in the border town of Farmington, New Mexico. As a first-generation college student, she started her higher education journey at a community college and slowly worked her way to the University of Arizona, where she earned her Ph.D. in higher education. As a faculty member at the University of Denver, Morgridge College of Education's higher education department, she centers Indigenous perspectives and practices in her work to ensure communities are empowered and well represented in their communal efforts. When she isn't sitting in front of the computer, she is a mother to Olin, a partner to a talented artist, Johnny, and a cat mom to Lucky Cat and Fletcher. Chris is an avid player and spectator of soccer since she was 4 years old. Wow. Welcome, Dr. Nelson. And finally, we have Dr. Heather Schotten. Dr. Shotton is a citizen of the Wichita and affiliated tribes and is also of Kiowa and Cheyenne descent. She is an associate professor and serves as chair of the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department at the University of Oklahoma, having previously served as an associate professor in Native American Studies at OU. She received her doctorate in adult and higher education from the University of Oklahoma in 2008. Dr. Schotten's research focuses on Indigenous students in higher education and Indigenous women, particularly in the areas of leadership and Indigenous women in academia. She served as a co-editor for the book, Beyond the Asterisks, Understanding Native Students in Higher Education, which addresses strategies for serving Native college students, and is also a co-editor for the book, Reclaiming Indigenous Research in Higher Education by Rutgers University Press. Prior to returning to OU, she served as Assistant Director of Multicultural Student Affairs at Oklahoma City University. She has spent her career serving students both in and out of the classroom. Dr. Shotton is the past president for the National Indian Education Association and was recently named the NIEA Educator of the Year. She is a strong advocate for Native education and serves Native students and communities on a national and local level. She lives in Norman with her partner, John Shotton, and their two daughters, Sloan and Sophie. Well, let's give a warm welcome to my colleagues and friends. I know each of you have also been involved in the IPKC in its earliest years, and that's how I know I came to know each of you. So with that understanding, we wanted to get started with some introductions for you all to introduce yourself and talk about your connection to NASPA and the IPKC. So now I'll pass it along to my colleagues to share.
I'll go ahead and start. So my connection with NASPA began early in my doctoral program. I remember I attended my first NASPA conference when it was in Denver. I want to say that was in 2005, maybe. So I'm going to date myself a bit. And, at that time was really kind of new to the organization, clearly, and just to higher ed and student affairs in general. And I remember being at that conference and intentionally seeking out other Indigenous folks. So looking in the program and seeing who was there, what were the presentations, and finding those people. So Stephanie Waterman was one of those folks. Pam Agoyo was one of those folks that I met during that time. And I think at the same time that was happening for others similarly at that conference. And a few of them kind of got together. I think it was Stephanie Waterman and Karen Francis Begay, Irvin Harrison, maybe Pam Agoyo, just to kind of meet and connect. And after that, a group of us got together with George McClellan, who has been a long time ally, but had been a long time member and really kind of figure in NASPA to explore how we created our own knowledge community and how we find a space. And so it really kind of began this year-long process of having conversations. And I remember the next year, I believe we were might have been Tampa Bay, and we had a meeting with folks who were interested in talking about what would it look like to start a knowledge community, and what are those needs, what do we need to do, and so it really kind of began that process of a core group that came together and put together the proposal to start the Indigenous Peoples Knowledge Community. And so I'll risk naming some of those people, fully knowing that I might leave some folks out, and that's not intentionally. It's just memory, I think, fades over the years. But again, George McClellan was one of the people that helped really guide us through what that process looked like, because he knew so much about NASPA. Stephanie Waterman, Irvin Harrison, Pam Agoyo, Karen Francis Begay, myself. And I know I'm leaving some people out, just a part of those original conversations and putting the original proposal together. And so that was really that connection to NASPA, and then to IPKC, and Irvin Harrison. I stepped up as our first chair for IKC once we were approved. And then we all kind of took turns from there, and who was going to serve as the chair in the original days. So that just a little bit of my own connection and that history with IPKC.
So I think I met Chris at my first NASPA, maybe. I don't know if it was my first NASPA. I had to look at my CV, like, when did I become a member of NASPA? I think it says 2005. So apparently I became a member in 2005, but I don't think I actually attended a NASPA till maybe 2007 or 2008. Because I think IPKC was formed, or newly formed, because apparently I was also started in a leadership role as the outreach membership coordinator in 2008. So, but I remember meeting Chris Nelson, Tammy James. I remember Tiffany, you being there as well. Matthew Van Alstine, or Michael Manel, Natalie Youngbull, Amanda Ticini, and then of course Karen and Heather and others. And I remember, though, I don't know if it was in 2008 or 9 was when we had the, yes, Shelley, thank you. When we had the session at HUNAP in Boston, or at Cambridge? And so I remember that was kind of my first entry to, like, oh, we're going to connect to like an offsite place, and getting lost at Harvard as well. I was like, dang, these colonizers, just kidding. Yes, and in the rain too, yes. So we were lost, we found it. We were happy to find HUNAP and to find the space that Native students called home. And so I served as the outreach membership coordinator. So I remember coordinating, working obviously with other people, when we went to Chicago, and we went to the Chicago Native Community Center, and having a group of us take some of our materials for our university and going to share those at the center there. I remember also going to Seattle, and we met there as well. And thanks, Karen had the connection to Cassandra Manuelito Kirkovet, and we were able to meet with her as well at Antioch University. And so I think for me, like, again, just like my natural role is to want to connect with like the community, and like figure out who the people are, and find ways that we can connect. Just like all of us, I think, want to do that. And so that's my memory. And then I also was able to serve as chair from 2011 to 2013 or something like that. I also remember at NASPA finishing my dissertation and having my laptop in my lap while I was attending sessions as chair or co-chair or chair-elect or something. But so I think it was very interesting. But one of my honors, and I haven't been able to do that yet with the students here at Muckleshoot, but I was really grateful to be able to take some of our NOLI students from UNM to NASPA when it was in LA a few years ago, and they were able to present there. So that was really awesome to be able to bring in some of our doctoral students there. So I just feel like there's always a space to connect at NASPA and just continue to grow our community. And so I'm really grateful for those connections.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris. I am just going down memory lane right now with Heather and Robin, sharing all the different conferences and thinking like, wow, I think the one big thing about my connection to NASPA, in particular IPKC, is just the community and mentorship and the sharing of possibilities. I think I was more like on the outskirts of just kind of in awe of Heather, Robin, Shelley, Pam, Karen, everyone in their leadership and just the presence, because I had really never been exposed to that sort of professionalism. And I was a new professional. I think I was like maybe year one into my advising role in student affairs. And so to me, it was actually like eye-opening that this was a career. Like I didn't know that this was something that would be the stepping stones to where I am now, because it was seeing Heather working on the dissertation, Robin working on the dissertation, then saying like, wow, this is a thing. And then Stephanie and I were actually the co-chairs for the research and scholarship segment. And that was the first time that I really started to dig into like what research was. And a couple of years into kind of attending IPKC, I realized I wanted to go get my master's in higher education. And that's when I decided to move to Arizona and became a lot more familiar with Amanda Taccini, Natalie Youngbull, and Karen Francisca Gay, who are also closely connected to the higher education department there. And so to me, it's just this really great feeling of knowing there were particularly women in these spaces that were cultivating mentorship. And again, like I said, the possibilities of what your future can be in such an affirming and loving manner that I think is very special. And I can see that legacy continuing with IPKC. And it's always on the back of my mind of like, how do I engage more? And so I just appreciate Tiffany bringing us back into the fold to be able to let folks who might be new to IPKC to know that history, but then also to say that we see you all doing the same work. And that just makes me feel very blessed and happy to be part of that.
Yeah, and I'll definitely add that I think that one thing that you hear from each of us is that it was a space where a lot of relationships were made, that they've been such longstanding relationships that I think sometimes it's easy to forget where we first met. And then as Chris said, as we're going back through memory lane, I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I met Chris, was at NASPA. And Tiffany, that's where we met. I mean, even though we were both at University of Oklahoma, that was kind of where we also met, like as professionals. And then, so Char, that's where we met Charlotte with Charlotte Davidson, was through NASPA. And my first introduction to her was when she was a doctoral student at University of Illinois. And we, part of that was the connections and work with folks around like Indigenous student affairs. And there were a group of us that went to Illinois. Molly Springer hosted us out there. So folks like John Garland and, Adrian Thunder and lots of folks that have we've had these relationships for, good grief. Almost a couple of decades now for some of us. And, Robin and I knew each other from college. But it's also where, those relationships around as colleagues and scholars start to solidify. And so it's fun to watch like Facebook memories that pop up, and we see our young, early professional selves and the fun times that we had. But yeah, just all of those relationships that were made and formed in some of these spaces.
And I'll just want to add too, just I think one of the things that's awesome, I think, was it a year or two ago? I don't remember, but I remember I was always like thinking about how we have our regional representatives and like our like secretary chairs and all that. But when I was thinking about all of our membership and like the people that were in office or connected to IPKC, how now most of those people have a doctoral degree. Or either like professors or like working in spaces where they're, really creating change for like Indigenous higher education. So I just think that's so amazing. And I just want to acknowledge that too.
Wow, this is truly taking me down memory lane as well too. So I really appreciate you all sharing your NASPA IPKC origin stories with us. I still remember as Heather was mentioning these Facebook memories. I have that picture of us doing the IPKC letters with our hands and our bodies at one of the knowledge community fairs. And just, I just remember how pinnacle that 2008 year for myself was, as my first time ever to NASPA by myself, not knowing a single soul, and really connecting with the IPKC and each one of you instantly, and looking to you all as role models in higher education, and all that you were doing and already dissertating, as you mentioned, or at whatever levels you were at in your professional careers, and to now see, wow, as Heather put it, almost 2 decades later, which is wild, and how far each of you all have come. And I mean, that's, a big reason why we're here today too, is to reconnect and to share those memories with young folks coming up through the IPKC pathway now, and leadership, and getting them involved, and to really celebrate these accomplishments that you all have had in writing all these several books, as we heard from your bios I shared earlier, and articles and contributions, scholarly contributions to Indigenous higher ed. And so I really want to pivot now to our conversation about your book, your forthcoming book on Indigenous motherhood in the academy. And I want to ask, what inspired you to write this book and pull together this great group of Indigenous mother scholars to share their stories?
I guess I can share that part of the. I had just had Roxy a few months before, and I was on parental leave, and I remember having a dream about like writing about my journey through motherhood, and at least like being able to like write about Emery and my journey with her, and then just thinking about going through like my 10-year process. And so I remember having that dream, and so I remember holding Roxy, because it's like, she's still attached to us, but holding her while she slept on my chest, and I was like, oh, I need to tell somebody. Like, let me tell Heather. I was like, Heather, I had this dream, and so I remember texting her saying I had a dream about like writing a book, or like a book around Indigenous motherhood, and then so I was like, is this something you might be interested in, like thinking about doing, or something like that? And then she said that she was interested. I'll let her say what she said, but and then she had suggested also at that time, like, what about Chris? What if we ask Chris? And I was like, oh yeah, that would be awesome. Um, and so that's kind of like how at least the conversation began. And then so we started like by text having that conversation, and then I think we had a meeting like not too long after that, and really started conceptualizing or thinking through. I remember like writing notes on my phone, like a text, like that, and that way, like we're trying to remember as I was like actually like on parental leave talking through that. And so I really just appreciated that at least I was starting from that. And I think for me, and I'll just share, and I want like Chris and Heather to share, like when I think about motherhood, and I think about like when you are a newer mom, and you're going through that process of like, how do you capture those moments, and how do you honor that journey? And so for me, gosh, I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but um when I had my daughter a few years before that and had lost her, um I had people really kind of like made me feel like I wasn't a mother after I lost her. Um and so I didn't feel like I had the privilege or the honor to even talk about being a mother until I had Rock. And so going through that for a few years without, I'm still a mom, and my daughter lived, and but people didn't acknowledge me as being a mom until actually after Roxy was born. And so I really wanted to honor her memory and her journey, because I really just want us to talk about like our children, whether they're here with us or not, and acknowledge that journey of motherhood. And so I think maybe that was Emery speaking to me in that way. And so I really appreciated Heather for wanting to work with me on that and honor that, but also for Chris also being willing to do that and be a part of that too.
Thank you, Rob. I mean, thank you, one. I think for being vulnerable and sharing that with us, and for also the vulnerability and willingness to share when that dream happened. And I feel really honored that you reached out to me and were able to share that with me, and that we were able to take this journey together and to bring our sister Chris in. And as you were talking about that, I was trying to remember. I don't remember what I said. COVID has done my memory in. The last 2 years has completely done my memory in. But what I do remember, and what I will say, is that over the years, Robin and I have worked on a lot of projects together, research projects, book projects, lots of different spaces. And one of the things that I have learned is that when Robin has an idea, it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen one way or another. And so when you're saying yes, you're saying yes to, let's dig in and let's do this. Let's do this work together. And I think this book took a little bit longer than what we had anticipated, but for all good reasons, like all really good reasons that were necessary. And I think I've really valued that. And so just the inspiration coming from, just that dream, which, I think we have to honor those messages. And, when whether it's, creator or ancestor speaking to us and saying, these are things that we need to write about and talk about. I think even in those conversations, we all knew that we all had different experiences with motherhood, and that, even listening to Robin talk about her experience with Emory and what that was for her. Originally we were thinking a lot about what does it mean to go through as, a faculty member, like the tenure process and everything that means when you're a mother, and what does it mean to experience loss as a mother, loss of a child, loss of a pregnancy. What does it mean to navigate these spaces and everything that comes with it? And, so for me, even thinking about in my doctoral program, I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, Sophie, when I was finishing up coursework. And that piece of motherhood and navigating, writing a dissertation with a newborn. And so I think all of that to say that we all knew that we had different stories to share, but that those stories were important and had a place in the academy, in the scholarship, and that, a lot of people have written about motherhood in different ways and in important ways, but that our stories needed to be told, and that there was a lot for us to unpack and to deal with. And I think a lot of healing that came from the process of writing this, writing our own chapters and writing together, and sharing in the stories from all of the women that were a part of it.
So I am extremely grateful for Robin and Heather inviting me into this project. I would say that I was the junior scholar looking in, like learning and taking notes and trying to figure out, like, what does this process mean? But yet the support and, dare I say, mothering that Heather and Robin provided to me as a junior scholar has been very invaluable. And I think also speaks to the way in which Robin and Heather navigate the academy to make sure that there is a wide range of experiences represented, and being intentional in who they bring into the writing process. So for me, being still pre-tenure, but hopefully we'll get tenure soon, because I am the one that was not tenured on this project, that they were also like, this will really help you to get towards that next step. And so for me, the book itself is an act of mothering me in the tenure process, if that makes sense, because it really has been cathartic to be able to process my own story, but then also learn from the contributors, learn from Heather and Robin, just even what mothering means to them, and helps me even further articulate and conceptualize what it means to be a mother scholar in the academy, and how I choose to navigate that process, and to remind myself that I have a lot of agency in that process too.
Thank you, all of you, for being vulnerable and sharing these stories and these journeys that you continue on as mothers. It is a lifelong process. So, that makes me think of, something you all really talk about with the book is culture and place. So in thinking about with this book and your journeys and writing your own stories, how does culture and place impact your mothering experience?
I think in general, like for as a mother, like my own experience, like it has impacted me in a lot of different ways. It's actually impacted a lot of important decisions like I've made recently. And um and I think for Roxy, for when she was born, I'm really grateful, like for us, or at least for me and like Gabe, I would say like it's really important for us to have her connected to like a tribal or indigenous community. And sometimes it's not our own. And so I just want to acknowledge and feel really grateful that we have been welcomed into different tribal communities to be able to like have her connected to Native people. And so that's been really important. And so when she was born, um, at the time Gabe was teaching at Walatoa at Jemez Pueblo, and really grateful that they allowed her to go to their daycare, which was an immersion daycare. And so she was hearing Toa spoken all of the time, and she was the only non-Jemez person there. And so we really were grateful that they were allowing her to be there in that space, and that I don't know, like I always wonder, like if she goes back and they speak Toa, will she recognize the words and like hear it? And so she was able to be in their daycare for like a year and a half until we left and came here. And so when we came back or to Washington, we moved here so that she could be closer to her tribal community, to my where my dad's from. And so for me, that place is really important, right? And like and her being able to now go to Chief Lushai, which is a part of the Puyallup tribe. We bought a house that's like 5 minutes from her school, and so we wanted to make sure like it's easy for her to have access to, and all of that. And also like how do we connect her to the tribal culture and the community here, but then also try to connect her back to her. So it's hard now because now we're like going back to Pendleton, and we can't go to like ceremonies or feasts. And then now we're trying to also go to Oklahoma, taking her to like Kiowa Gorge Clan, taking her to different things that are really important for us, for her to have connections to. But I think to me that's like kind of what my life centers around, is in that regard, is making sure that she has that connection in that space. And so that's, I think, to me, when I think about culture and space, like she's inspired me, right, to be more connected, and I'm not perfect by any means, I'm still learning, but I think it's always like wanting to do better. And I think that's something that for me as a mother has inspired me in that way.
So I know for myself, I became a mother my first year of my Ph.D. program, and I'll just put it out there. I'm very much so a perfectionist and do things a certain way, and have been always put in my family as the one who gets stuff done. And there was a lot of pressure, maybe not explicit, but just the way that our family dynamics as a child, like how I grew up. And so my mother is an amazing mother. Like she taught me so much, and she is mindful and very intentional with how she treated all of us as kids. And what I learned was through this book process, even is understanding like what practices work for her and what do I need to cultivate and change. Because how she mothered from a cultural standpoint was different because the social, financial, everything is so different than how I currently am navigating. And so how do I take pieces of what I really appreciate from her and remold it into something that is appropriate and fulfilling for my life? Because I am a first generation college student, so I don't have the immediate role models of how to be a professional slash mom that's still engaging with Indigenous cultural practices around mothering, because typically those very neoliberal settler colonial spaces like the academy are in opposition to how our mothers have been taught to treat family, to mother, and so forth. So to me, it's been this very much so a learning process. And like Robin mentioned, still being a learner in this process and being forgiving of yourself is super important. And whenever folks read this book, I think they'll see chapters that where women talk about that, where mothers talk about learning how to understand who we are in these different times and contexts, in particular what we were socialized to think mothers are supposed to be doing. And so for me, it's very much so a learning process.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece. I mean, clearly, I think for all of us, that question about how it impact culture and place impact mothering, I think that it's not impact. I think it's central to who we are and how we mother. But I think that we're all navigating that in different ways, and also very similar ways, and that being the recognition that we're all still learning. Every day we're learning, and we're also, I think there's a lot of spaces where there might be undoing, intentional healing and undoing, and what does that look like? And I think what was really important for me as we were engaging with this book, and even thinking about my own writing, and what story was I going to share in my chapter, how was that going to look? It was really important to share the difficult pieces, right? The hard pieces, and that motherhood is a beautiful thing for so many reasons, but it's also messy, and it's also hard. And so I think for me, it was being honest, like really being honest and embracing the opportunity to be vulnerable in ways that felt really scary at times, but are also important, because those are, there are lessons in all of that. And so I think that the lessons that we take from each of our stories were important, and knowing that it wasn't going to always be like this beautiful poetic, like story of motherhood that is it's not picture perfect, and that that sharing those pieces, the messiness of it was just as beautiful. Right.
I was just going to mention too, whenever you get the book, if you're able to purchase it or access it, hopefully, that in the introduction, I just wanted to share that we also have a collective introduction at the beginning of that space. And so we try to integrate everybody's thoughts or responses, not only at the beginning, but also at the conclusion of the book, and how we are tying it together. And so I think that was one of the things that we also wanted to be intentional about. And then I don't know if we'll, how much detail like we can get into, but I know we're also limited on time, but I know one of the things that we also like wanted to be acknowledging about is that this book is kind of still framed within a settler colonial like narrative in regards to like the mothers that are depicted. Like the mothers are female mothers. We weren't able or to have or acknowledge, even though we wanted to invite a wide range of experiences in regards to mothering, and we wanted to be intentional in that regard and to like really like be honoring. But one of the beautiful things about the chapters that is there that I really loved, and Heather's one of the ones that has intergenerational aspect to it because she has her daughter as a co-contributor, which I think is really awesome. And we have other chapters where they're co-authored with their children, which I think is really beautiful. And to hear that space or so I think that that's the beautiful thing about this book, and just wanting to honor like those wide ranges. We were only able to go so far, so I know there'll definitely be critiques of the book as well, and we're welcome to that. And so I just want to acknowledge that as well. It's not perfect and it's not fully representative of everybody, but it's a starting place where we can at least share the diverse and unique experiences of each of us that we're contributing to the book as well.
Thanks for sharing those extra pieces there, Robin. That's important. And really, I think what resonated with me from what you all collectively shared here is not only the difficult process of putting some of these emotions and all that you're experiencing, the experiences down on paper, but also the piece that Dr. Shotton mentioned of the culture and place piece, not how it really truly impacts mothering, but how it is central to who we are as Indigenous mothers and how we mother. That really resonated with me to hear that piece and that reframing of that particular question. And I think, with that, I wanted you all to share a little bit about, for our listeners here, any examples of resistance you have employed in academic spaces since becoming mothers. I think this would be really helpful for Indigenous mothers in the academy right now, and some things that they're experiencing, struggling with within as Dr. Nelson put, the neopolitical spaces within the academy. So if you all would be so kind to share about examples of resistance you've employed, I think that would be really helpful to hear about.
I would say, like, on the simplest terms for me, it has been to just bring my son and family to different events and spaces because, sorry,
we're all laughing because Roxy just busted into Robin's office as Chris is trying to talk seriously about resistance. So I'm just gonna put it out there, like,
Yep.
Hi Roxy, just busted into the office. It was perfect timing.
It was.
and we're not going to edit that out.
I know.
We're not.
We'll just leave that in there.
There
she is. Hi, Roxy.
Oh, she's so beautiful, dancing.
I think that is the best example of resistance right there.
Sorry, she said hi.
I think one thing that I'm learning recently is, because I've been honestly overtaxed and overburdened by my institution and just questioning everything around me of like why I'm at the academy, is I've been talking with my with a mentor colleague, and they reminded me too that the time that we have with our children is so limited, in that before you know it, my son Olin is going to be graduating high school and going on and doing his own thing. And so that relationship's going to change. But like right now at the age of 11, I have the opportunity to hold him close and to prioritize who he is. And so while I would bring him to a lot of events because I wanted him to have the exposure of the university and see what I do, and I'm also realizing and recognizing that I need to have that balance too, that I need to maybe say that I can't do that university event because I need to prioritize my child. And so as I move forward, I'm going to be more intentional of not just trying to justify in my mind that by me bringing my child, I'm disrupting settler colonial spaces of what is proper, but more like, no, how do I step out of this space because my son is here and I need to spend this time with him, not have him sit in the corner while I do a presentation, right? And so to me, I'm really trying to recognize that resistance can not only mean one thing at one point in time, but that it can evolve and change along with ourselves as well too. And another point that I've also had to explain, and I've had conversations with other mothers in particular who live in multi-generational homes. So my mother and my stepfather live with us here in Denver. And while people say like, oh, you have a automatic babysitter to take care of your child whenever you have things, I've also said that there's a lot of other cultural responsibilities and familial responsibilities that come along by having my parents here in this space. And so it's not always this perception of me having this freedom to be able to do whatever, because I even have my own internal pressures that I've said, oh gosh, I've been gone every night this week and I haven't cooked dinner, and then having my own internalized, like, I'm not a good mother thoughts because I'm letting my mom do all the quote unquote work. And how do I know that, like, how do I disrupt those narratives within my own mind that it's okay and there's other spaces where I'm giving and contributing to the family? And so to me, it's an ongoing back and forth that I feel like I don't know if I'll ever feel satisfied, but I think just knowing that there's this dynamic at play helps me to be more kind to myself, to be more kind to my family, and then to really appreciate like the perks of being in academia where I can go away on a conference for a few days and, sleep in my own bed, or, have that little bit of me time to be with colleagues and learn. So there's just a lot of ways to resist and be open to continually changing and reframing why you do certain things.
Thank you all. And I particularly appreciated, Chris, what you just gave us of that notion of resistance being able to evolve and change with ourselves. As our experiences change, as we progress in the academy, as we struggle within the academy, context and structures in place that were meant for us to struggle with. So all those things that really resonated, of that notion of how that can shape differently in these spaces. I wanted to move now to thinking about, how has being an Indigenous mother affected or assisted in your finding that balance in scholarship, teaching, and service endeavors?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know about the balance piece. I think we all kind of chuckle a little bit, right? I think it's something that we both struggle with and try to strive for too, and that we're constantly negotiating and thinking about and returning to and experiencing in different ways. I think I will say for me, motherhood, it has strengthened me in ways that that shape how I enter into spaces, right? Always thinking about my daughters and what example I'm setting for them, but also the examples that they set for me. They teach me every single day, and they encourage me to do scary things. And Sophie Shotton keeps me on track. And from the time that she was little, would ask like what I'm working on, what projects I'm working on. Are you done with that book yet? And so she's like a little taskmaster. But I think that I've always tried to share with them what I'm working on. So if I'm, in that struggle of finding balance of when I'm home and really being present, but then sometimes I'm working on, a writing project or research or something for work or whatever it might be, talking to them about what I'm writing and talking to them about what I'm doing. And so because I want them to see and for all of this to not be a mystery to them, right? For academia to not be a mystery, for college to not be a mystery. Um, and and so I've always openly kind of talked about, and they'll ask me what I'm working on. And Sloan is a junior in college now, or just finished her junior year. And she'll still ask me like, "What are you working on, Mom? How was your day? What's going on at work?" And so they've really just been a part of that. So I'm always learning from them, and they they're always encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone and to try new things, to do scary things. And more importantly, I think to embrace vulnerability and to really shed that desire to be perfect, right? Or that pull to be perfect and to always get it right, and to embrace the messiness and to embrace my mistakes and my shortcomings, and in that to be accountable. And so, I think it's that piece of motherhood and really the relationship with my daughters and with my niece, who is also my daughter, right? And a close part of our family. It's really the lessons that we learn together alongside of one another. And so it's how I come into these spaces. It's allowed me to be more vulnerable in my own writing and my own scholarship, to opening up to that. Robin mentioned that the chapter that I have in the book that that Sloan and I wrote together, and it was a really hard chapter. And we're addressing really serious issues, and it required not only for her to be vulnerable, but it was her bravery that inspired me to be open to being vulnerable and to what that looks like. And I think that that's important in all of our scholarship, and in the same with teaching and service, right? Like all of that, the way that I'm in those relationships with them guides how I show up in these spaces in the academy. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's my daughters and how they teach me.
Thank you both for sharing. I think for me, like I'm still like figuring that out. I feel like, I mean, Roxy, I know all of us have lived through this pandemic, but so I really have. Roxy was 2 when it started, and so we had her at home while we were working, and she was doing preschool virtually, and I was working. I felt like I like overly overworked myself during that time because I was working when I could in the daytime, and then I'd work at night for like 4 hours, and then work again during the daytime. And so this academic year, I told myself, I said, I'm gonna take the weekends off. Like I'm literally not working Friday night. I'm not working Saturday. Of course, I do teach on the weekends, like once a month, but besides those weekends, like I'm gonna, take off, and then I'll work again Sunday night if I need to, and that's like how I've been trying to be really intentional this year, because I feel like I lost a lot of my life or during the pandemic because I was so focused on making sure she was okay, making sure that we were sharing our time with her and all of that, because she was with us 24 hours a day. And so I just really wanted to be mindful of her interaction with us. And of course, none of that was perfect. She still had the phone and all of that sometimes when I have meetings. And so just want to acknowledge that too. But and so I think for me, it's really just being intentional to try to share time with her and make sure that we have time that we're spending with her as a family. Because I do still feel guilty. So I thought like about you, Heather, and like Chris, like I don't know how y'all did it when you're children were younger and like feeling guilty when you're away from them and you're traveling. I know it's really hard, because Roxy now she's at a point where she misses me and like asks, how long are you gonna be gone? And so for me this year, I've been trying to balance being away at conferences, but also like going home to check on my mom and trying to take care of her. While I can't like live with her, I can at least go home and visit her like every couple of months and be able to check on her and all of that. And so that's been really hard for me to figure out that balance as well, like the caretaking responsibilities. And I'm not the full caretaker of her, but I try to look out for her and call her every day. Um, and so for Roxy too, there's an added layer of the medical issues. And so she has like 5 to 7 doctors that I have to like make sure that I'm keeping on track of, like when she has to go and see her check-ins and checkups and follow-ups. And so sometimes I know I let things slip, and I try not to let that make me feel like a bad parent. But I think that also, like, how do we take care of ourselves? And that's something else that I've been really like in January. I said, I'm taking care of myself too. I'm taking care of my daughter. I'm taking care of my mom. I'm going to also try to take care of myself. And so actually on my wall, or on my whiteboard, self-care. And so like, and it's not like, well, one of them is getting a massage, but it's like going to get a hearing test, going to a women's doctor appointment, like things that I was neglecting over the pandemic. And so taking care of myself also is me taking care of Roxy, right? Because if I'm not taking care of myself and I let things linger, then I'm not going to be here as long as I could be for her. And I want to live as long as I can, so that she has me in her life. And so that's also an intentionality of like how to balance like the mothering and then also the scholarship and all of that too. And so to me, that's kind of like what I'm trying to work on right now.
As you were talking, Robin, I was contemplating like what have I done differently, in particular since the pandemic, and finding or seeking some sort of relationship of what is this tenure position mean to me. And then I realized that I'm not the only one in this dynamic that's an adult that can participate in mothering or parenting, and that's my partner. And I think that is one positionality that I come with, that I think that in the book, we, as Robin had mentioned, that we do have specific perspectives shared from different orientations. And for myself, like I recognize that I come from a hetero cis relationship marriage, that we've been married for almost 20 or over almost 20 years. And so whenever I started to feel like the pandemic was really taking over my wellness, it was like, okay, how do I bring my partner into this? And how do I articulate as best as I can to say that I need you to step up more? I've been doing this for a long time, and rightfully, like I took it on, like that was my decision. But now I'm realizing that I can't sustain this, and it hasn't been easy, I would say, because it's requiring a lot of me to unlearn like how things get done in a different way, because my partner is a different person, has different practices and thinks logically differently. And so how do I let go of some of that perfectionism to bring him into the fold to take over some of the duties and responsibilities? For example, my son just got braces, and I had double booked myself for the appointment. And I just told my partner, I said, I can't make it, you have to do it. And he canceled meetings and took him to the appointment. And I was sitting there like thinking 101 questions of like, I wish I was there to be able to ask these questions. And I just had to let that go. And my son has braces, he's doing okay, like no one came back with a missing tooth or anything, right? And so it's letting go of some of those expectations and trusting my partner to be just that, a partner. And so it has helped me to feel a little bit more supported, but also that I can ask for help. because when I became a young mother, I didn't have any role models to know how to navigate being a mom within the culture of academia. So I just went on hyperdrive, right? Trying to do everything, be everything. And I think I lasted a lot longer than I probably thought I could in that state. But I also realized that that's not how I want to. I don't want that sort of modeling to influence my child of this is how you're quote unquote successful. This is what this means for your job, that you have to operate on this high level. And and because he is a male, that I also realize that I might be modeling like expectations for himself if he ever ends up in a cis relationship, that the woman is at this high functioning level where maybe the partner does something different and engages differently. So I really am trying to be an advocate, and then I bring my partner into that conversation of like, what are we modeling for our child in terms of relationships and boundaries, and how can we not just see about it as ourselves, but cultivating that next generation.
A lot of that resonates. I think the points that really drove home for me were the taking care of ourselves first that Robin was mentioning too. And I think, that Heather was also mentioning too, of, how our children can also encourage us to be braver and teach us so much, but that in order to continue to be there for them, we have to take care of ourselves. I think that resonates so much for me because I too, during the pandemic, let that slide, didn't take care of myself. And my partner's, thank goodness for my partner. I'm also in I'm a hetero relationship as well. And I appreciate you, Chris, calling that out and acknowledging that. But he encouraged me. I went for my first mammogram today. I had never done that. I haven't been at a doctor's appointment in over a couple of years. So it was a big deal to actually start going to take care of myself as well, so I can be there for my children in the long run. And then I also appreciate, that point that you mentioned, Chris, about, balancing our partners in this process, as parents, we are talking about mothering, but also acknowledging the piece of parenting, right? Across different gendered identities and what that looks like, and really having to sustain that when we've been, like, I can speak for myself, pouring in so much into my children that I shouldn't feel as guilty when I'm now getting to travel a lot more, though I do feel it being away from my kids, but having asked my partner to step in and help with some of those, parenting activities that maybe he hadn't been as accustomed to previous to this. So with that, I know we're limited on time, and I so have enjoyed this conversation. We could keep going for, I know, another hour at least. But I did want to end with a question about, words of wisdom that you would have to share with other Indigenous mothers or parents in the academy navigating similar struggles. If there's anything you would like to leave our audience with.
Well, I don't know about words of wisdom. I'm always like, but what I will share is lessons that I've learned. So, and I think that people can take what is useful for them and leave what is not, right? So I don't know that I have wisdom to impart, but I do have lessons that I've experienced and lessons that I've learned. And so I think that, for me, some of those hard lessons have been both ones that I've learned and ones that have been modeled by other people in different ways, is that your journey and your and how you navigate the academy doesn't have to look one particular way. And that's really was difficult because we're socialized and told from day one that it's supposed to look a particular way. And this is what the right way to navigate the academy as a scholar looks like, as a woman looks like, as an Indigenous person. This is what it looks like. And I think that it's one of the things that I always appreciate about Robin and Chris and working alongside them and with them is that there's always these conversations about, well, why do we have to do it that way, or let's do it different, or and so that really kind of pushing back and also refusing, right? So that refusing of, no, we don't have to do it that way. That everyone's journey looks a little bit different, so there's not one way to do it. I would also say, the other, some of the other lessons are that, we're setting examples for lots of different people, right? Our children, our students, our community members, our family members, our colleagues, all the time. And I think one of the most important lessons I have learned from my own daughters, and really that came out of the process of writing with, with Sloan, but also with Sophie in the last couple of years, as we're kind of reflecting on our experiences in the pandemic, is that that the desire for me to always look like I have it together and to always be strong, or to put on a brave face or whatever, that I wasn't doing them any favors, and I was modeling and teaching something that I wasn't noticing, and that was that they always had to be strong, and that they couldn't be vulnerable, that they couldn't mess up, that that there's, again, that this is how you do things. And so it was a really hard and a really important conversation, and one that I'm really thankful for with my daughters, about like how they see me and how I present myself as, you got to have it together. And so that shift to, it's okay for things to be messy. And so when Chris talks about being a perfectionist, that resonates. I get it. That is me. But embracing the messiness and the uncertainty, and just that we don't know. Like, sometimes we don't know, and sometimes we don't have the answers, and most of the time I don't have it together, and that's okay. And that's also important. And something for us to model is that it's all right to not have it all together, and to not have it all figured out, and to not always be strong, and to admit that when we're scared, or when we're tired, when and to ask for help. So all of those things, I think, have been lessons that I have learned, that have been important for me, and just appreciate the people who've guided me in that, and from my sisters to my own children, and how they've been gracious with me and patient in helping me to learn those lessons.
I think, I guess if I could share, like, I don't know if they're words of wisdom, but things that I think have helped me, and I think this was brought up earlier, is how we're trying to create more, I would say more, but healing spaces that maybe weren't always there for us, and in our lives growing up. And it was, again, as a result of like the historical trauma, the boarding schools, and so many other things. So I know for us, not that it's perfect or anything, but, trying to provide access to Roxy to have the ceremonies, to have the things that we didn't have. And I didn't get my Kaiwa name till I was in my early 20s with my grandma. And I had an uncle who got his, and he's in his 70s just this last year. But Roxy, she got her Kaiwa name when she was 4, when she turned 4 last summer. And thanks to one of her relatives who gave her name. But she got her Umatilla name when she was 1. And so for me, like, those are really important, because naming ceremonies are important, at least like in both of the Umatilla and the Kaiwa tribe. And so just wanting to acknowledge that as like a part of like reclaiming in some ways who we are. We're not maybe going to reclaim everything, but we are trying to reclaim pieces of ourselves and trying to build those connections. And, for us now that we live closer and now that the pandemic is getting a little bit better, that she can maybe go root digging, she can go huckleberry picking, she can do the things that I wasn't also able to grow up doing, but I want to give her the access and the connections to be able to have to do that. And so I think that's also a part of connecting and reconnecting to who we are. And then one of the things for us that we've tried to do with Roxy, I think, and this is like, I don't know if it's a wisdom, but I think about where I grew up and like the norms, right, of like genderization and like gender norms and gender roles and like what kind of like what Heather was saying about, I'm still getting out of this, like not wearing makeup all the time, but because my mom, put that in me, you need to wear makeup all the time, you need to wear earrings all the time, you need to like do all these things. And but for me, for Roxy, like I'm trying to like, no, you don't have to do that all the time, like you can. And all of these things that we grew up in our families with are like, that's a boy thing, that's a girl thing. And no, you can do whatever you want to, Roxy, you don't have to. And telling her like now, we've been telling her since she's 2, you can love whoever you want to love, like whoever you want to love, that's totally your decision. And whether you name yourself as a girl or a boy, that's your decision. Whatever you want to feel, that's your decision. And we'll honor like whatever you come into your being to be, and like allowing our children to be who they're supposed to be instead of feeling like they're fitting some categories that they've grown up to be, but also to have access to their culture. And I think for me, I think that's probably the privilege that I have in being in the academy, is because we have that access and that privilege to have time sometimes when we need it, to be able to go and do the things that we want to with her. That's really important for us. And so to me, that's maybe like my wisdom. I don't know about wisdom, but my experience that we've tried to do and create for her, because it's really important that we create a better life for her, but not necessarily materially, but experientially and values wise. And like, how do we do that in ways that are intentional and still learning and still growing in that as well?
I think one of the things that has been an ongoing thread that everyone's story and experience has brought together is learning how to be kind to ourselves. So if there are Indigenous mothers in the academy that are feeling like they're not doing enough or doing it right, that you probably are doing just great. And learning to not feel like you're not doing enough is really hard. And it's okay to have those good days, and it's okay to have those bad days. I think the one thing that I know I have, and I'm so grateful, is to have support like Heather, Robin, Tiffany, Natalie, to be able to go to and share my deepest, darkest fears, and to be able to hear someone say the things I need to hear at different points in time. And so if there's anything that I can offer, is that you're not alone, and it's okay to never feel like you got it perfect.
I think that's a great way to wrap us up and, share a lot of the major themes that we heard. But I still do think it's great wisdom that you have definitely imparted today, or lessons, as Heather put it. But at any rate, I'm very grateful to be in this space, to be sharing this time with you all today. I know it took us a few times to schedule and get here. It's how it is. That's life as Indigenous mothers in the academy. And I just appreciate and look up to really each and every one of you all, and how you do mother and how you manage all of life's challenges. And I just want to encourage our audience. We'll have an opportunity to tweet some additional questions that you may have after you listen to this, and we'll share with our amazing scholar authors here. But please go out and purchase this book. You can pre-order it online. We'll put the link out here. But it does come out in August, and I cannot wait to dive into it and read these amazing stories that we just got little snippets of today. So again, Wado, so grateful for your time. And everyone, go off and do great things. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for hanging with us in the Indigenous Peoples Knowledge community.